I was 7 years old when I first heard him scream. It scared me then, and it scares me now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back live to the Sasquatch Outpost podcast. And we are episode 62 tonight. Glad you guys are with us. I missed you last week. And, those pre-recorded podcasts are good to fill in a pinch, but it's just not as much fun watching yourself on a pre-recorded as doing a live. So we are back live and got a fantastic show tonight. I can't wait to introduce my guest. Got back from California on Sunday, drove my Dodge out on Monday, and came back on, let's see, is that right? No, drove out Monday, came back on Friday, and there's nothing like getting 12 miles to the gallon on a truck that's got a big old gas tank. And I love my truck, but man, it's a gas sucker. I'm telling you what. So, but we managed to tow my daughter's car back, and they are now in Colorado with us. So I'm excited to have them here. And while I was in Southern California, I met up with Brett and Jill, who I interviewed a couple podcasts ago, and who produced Flash of Beauty. And we went to a film lab in North Hollywood. Let me tell you something. North Hollywood ain't Hollywood. North Hollywood is like a slum in any big city. It is not like Hollywood. So I didn't go to Hollywood, but North Hollywood. In fact, I was at McDonald's, and there was a guy begging outside, and went and bought him a lunch. And I thought, yeah, this doesn't look like Hollywood to me. But anyway, they had this lab, and so we redigitized that footage. I told you about this, I think, last time. The footage from 1962, we think. And it's better, but it's still inconclusive. And I don't want to show it to y'all until Brett and I have a chance to do some more work cleaning it up and seeing if we can get any conclusive decision as to whether that's a person or a Bigfoot. But we'll see. I thought it was going to be like overwhelmingly obvious, and we're sitting there in the lab in front of a screen, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, that's better, but I still can't see. I can't tell what that is for sure. So I was disappointed by that, but that's life. And I enjoyed interviewing Ron and Alan McGargle. Crazy stuff going on at Bradshaw Ranch in Arizona. It's a lot like Skinwalker Ranch, but it is doesn't have the kind of malevolent overtones that Skinwalker has. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff, a lot of harmful stuff that happens to Skinwalker that doesn't seem to happen at Bradshaw for some reason. But anyway, and I apologize for being so sleepy during that pre-recorded podcast. I've been trying to get used to using a CPAP, and it's kicking my assets. So I am hoping to get used to that, where it's going to make a difference to me and be able to sleep more at night. But that's, if you guys will put up with me being a little tired every few podcasts, hopefully we're going to get past that. So on the way back from California, we went through this. If you've driven to California, you know this area, but let's show these this photo, a couple photos, and there's a rest stop. Man, is this gorgeous. I mean, dry as a bone, but just gorgeous, beautiful. I think there's one more picture there. And yeah, amazing colors of the desert there in Utah. And there's actually some settlements in that same area. So you can go ahead and go up to that. So Dave Pilates sent me these a couple days ago. He and Angie went out to a lake at 2:30 in the morning and got a whole bunch of pictures. Now, if you've not been following this on the news, there's the biggest solar flares in like 20 years. And the result is the Aurora Borealis has come way south, and they got these shots in Montana, but just incredible. It looks like an angel, man. It's just unbelievable colors. And boy, I wish we could get that here in Colorado. We've had rain and snow and everything you want except clear skies to see if we can see this phenomenon, but it's unbelievable. I got a call, I got an email from a guy. This is funny because this is the second time this guy's reached out to me. So any of you that have been around the Bigfoot world for any amount of time probably know the name Rick Dyer. Now, Rick Dyer is a big hoaxer. He did 2 major hoaxes trying to fool people that he had killed the Bigfoot and that he had the body. And, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you, or shame on me, the opposite. But anyway, they reached out to me like a year ago and said, hey, we've got this Bigfoot, wondered if, and this is the one that Rick was traveling around the country charging people to see this dead Bigfoot that he had built. It's kind of like Boomer. When I built Boomer, I said, no, I'm not interested. And I said, the history of this thing tells me I'm not interested. So he just contacted me again. I think he forgot that he contacted me, and he's like, yeah, if you're interested, it's only 10 grand. I'm like, sorry, I got a lot better things to do with 10 grand than to buy this hoaxed Bigfoot. And so he's desperate. Obviously, he hasn't been able to sell it. So he came back to me again, and we're not going to buy it. So I've been working on our escape room upstairs, and some weird things have been happening in the store. Now, you guys know that the store was built in 1878. So it's well over 140 years old. Who knows all the stuff that's happened in this building over these century plus. But I think I may be pissing off some previous residents of the property, because yesterday morning when Lori came in to open up, there was clothing on the floor that normally we come in, everything's neat and tidy like it was. There's these, we sell these little models of our store that you can put together. They're made out of cardboard. And so Doug Hychek created those for me, and a bunch of those were on the floor. And I thought, okay, that's almost a statement saying, here's the models of the store, and I'm going to toss this stuff on the floor. but there were t-shirts and sweatshirts and not a ton, but there was stuff on the floor nonetheless. So Daphne and I were talking, and she goes, well, why don't you turn on the motion sensing thing on the cameras inside the store? So I did. And last night there were two, don't play it yet. Just hold, you can pause it right there. At 2:30 this morning and 3:30 this morning, I had two events, and I was alerted. And so I don't know what this wasn't motion, it was noise. So the camera can go on by motion or by noise. These were noises. I don't know what these noises are. I mean, I've been in that room 1,000 times. I built that room, for Pete's sake. I don't know what these noises are, but I'll let you listen and see if you guys can figure it out. So what's going on is when it hears a noise, the camera turns on. So you get a color image. I don't know what those noises are. And it was enough that, yeah, Catherine, if you live anywhere near here, I would love for you to come and sage the building. Now, I don't necessarily want to tell them to leave because they have not been bothersome to us. They've never harmed us. You know, I think they're trying to communicate something. What I want to understand is what they're trying to communicate. That's the bigger question to me. But I don't necessarily want them to leave. I just want to understand what they're trying to tell me, if anything. So just interesting, strange noises. It's almost sounded like a door opening, but you can see the door and it wasn't opening. So I don't know what that first noise was, but I've let me keep it out in time here. I had some people come in with a TV recently that are looking to maybe do a TV show, and they represent one of the ghost hunter shows. And I said, please have them come and let's have them check out the store and spend the night in the Bigfoot Museum. Last thing I want to show here real quick before I bring on my guest is this little video at the end of one of our camping trips last summer that Wayne and I were both on. We filmed this couple and just had them talk about some of the things that happened, just so you get an idea of what things happen.
Well, you know, like a limb was pulled off. I waited, nothing further happened, so I continued my rest. And then last night, even after Arya here hearing the footsteps by the tent and me apparently rustling and stuff, that after everybody went to bed, and of course they heard after Wayne had seen the eyes and so forth, communicated that through the walkie-talkies and stuff, but everything settled back down, everybody went to sleep, and I know I heard some knocking, wood on other wood, and tuck, tuck, tuck. It only about 3 knocks at a distance, and that was about it. I waited for further, but nothing. And then I did hear, I don't know if it was a cow in the distance. Usually cows follow that up with another hoop, but woo,
and there are cows around.
And there are cows.
We know because we stepped in the cow pies. So
she was cow tracking.
So well, good. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Would you do it again?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Good. All right. Well, thanks for being a cameraman, Wayne.
Absolutely.
So we had some fun stuff happen, and of course we're going to be on Jill's property this summer. If you come with us for either the camping or the horseback camping, we're going to be on her property because that's ground central. So we do have a night hike coming up on the 25th, the same day as the big conference. So I'm going to be hoofing it back from the big conference to do the night hike that same night. But you can see there's quite a few open spots. I think I just got some more reservations today. I didn't look to see what for, but if you want to book, I would say do it this summer. I don't know if we're going to do it at Jill's again next summer. I mean, we're just taking it 1 year at a time, but Jill's property is Grand Central for Sasquatch. So you want to be with us this summer if you want to do it, if you're ever going to do it with us. So saw an interesting quote talking about Sasquatch and I'm just trying to turn something off here real quick because I just heard a ding that I don't want. Okay. Here's the quote. For the believer, proof is not necessary, and for the skeptic, no proof is possible. So I'm not trying to prove that Bigfoot exists. I know they exist. I don't need any more proof. I'm trying to figure out how to communicate with them, how to understand their culture, their language, all these things. But for the skeptic, no proof is going to be enough because they just decide that they don't exist. And therefore you can present whatever you want and it's not going to do any good because they've already made up their mind. So just thought that was an interesting quote that I appreciated and related to. Okay. So tonight we're talking about the movie that got everything started for me. I was 10 years old, went to a movie theater in our neighborhood in San Bernardino, California, and watched a movie called The Legend of Boggy Creek. 10 years old, scared the bejesus out of me. And it was rated G at the time, and it still scared me to death. And I remember doing like you did when you're a kid. There would be a scene would come up, and I'd be like, trying to look and not look at the same time. And if I was at my home, I would have gotten behind the couch and just kind of looked over to see what was going on. But well-made movie, made and we'll talk about this in a minute, was the first docudrama ever made. Not just about Bigfoot, but the first docudrama ever filmed. And so my guest, let's go ahead and bring Pamela in. Pamula Pierce Barcelou is the daughter of Charles Pierce, who was the director and producer of The Legend of Boggy Creek. Pamela, I'm really grateful to have you with us tonight.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
You bet. And we've been talking about getting you on for a while, and some different things happened that made it difficult to do. But Pam and her husband David live in New Hampshire now, and but I was not aware till you told me just before the show that this was the first docudrama. Tell us about that.
So, The Legend of Boggy Creek was released initially as a documentary, since there were no docudramas back at that time. If you look at the numbers from 72 to 75 when it played, technically it's the third highest grossing documentary of all time.
Wow.
So it made it was a lot of first that, it pioneered, and it made a lot of money. It was considered a blockbuster, though they didn't really use that term back then.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that it, like you said, it was a G-rated film that people could take their kids to, or grandparents,
and scare them.
and scare them. Yeah. And not be embarrassed. And,
Uh-huh.
this past weekend, somebody had sent me or tagged me or something in a post, and these people had a screening room, and you saw all these different age groups, like grandparents and probably aunts and a bunch of kids. And then the movie starts playing, and you see this like thing come up to the side door and it's scratching. They've gotten somebody to put on a costume to
Oh,
scare all
no.
the kids, but that's kind of what people still do to this day. They all get together and it's a big group, and so that's fun.
Now there's a question from Linda. Can you still watch it today? Absolutely. And where can they watch it, Pam?
So right now you can watch it. We have physical disc. We just created the 4K UHD HDR 10 plus, which that's a big mouthful, but anyway, that was a big deal for us to do, because we're just kind of an independent. So we have that format, we have a Blu-ray format, and we have a DVD format. And you can also watch it on Amazon. You can watch it on Apple, Google Play, which is YouTube Movies, I think, and Microsoft.
And it would be the 4K version that you'd be watching?
So now here's the thing. When you're streaming it on like Amazon, for some reason they will not let me upload it into 4K. So it's that 1020 whatever is the standard. And they tell me that there's a void of 4K movies. So I don't know why I've had such trouble, but here's what I've kind of deduced, that Amazon and Apple, those people are used to dealing with big movie studios or something. If you're dealing with kind of a classic film and not dealing with an individual like myself. And so I don't even think that they have avenues almost for me to go into. So I've had a real issue with getting it up in 4K, but like I said, we do have that in physical media, which it looks outstanding.
It does. Huge difference. Huge difference.
So if you watched it in the last 45 years, you've probably noticed the grayscale pan and scan. This is truly like watching a new movie.
Yes, it is. And you now own the film, isn't that correct?
I do, yes. What a blessing.
Yes, it is.
In 2018, the original producer was L.W. Buddy Ledwell, and he had put all the money up for the film, and so he had passed away in 2014, I believe. But I reached out to his son, Steve, who actually plays the monster in a lot of the movie. We can talk about that in a minute. But anyway, so I asked him if he would let me release it, if I could find a good source print. And he said, yeah. And so it took another 4 years to find that print, but we finally did. And so.
And it was filmed on 16 millimeter. Is that right? Or
I think it was. So it was filmed in Technoscope.
okay.
Yeah, which they had to. I'm not a technical person, but they call it 2 perf and there's a 4 perf or something like that. So, but it was a way, I was told by George Eastman Museum over there, who has done the work and the restoration and the remaster.
Eastman as in Eastman Kodak, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And they told me that it was really kind of a genius move that he made, because Technoscope film was a lot less expensive than buying like normal film. Later on, I don't think in the processing of the film, I think it got more expensive actually. But for the upfront cost, it was a way that he could keep the cost down and get the film in the can, so to speak.
Okay. Now
I wanted to tell you one little
yeah.
So when my dad first went to Mr. Ledwell about raising money, he asked for $35,000, which was kind of a lot of money back then. But anyway, 3 days into principal photography, he ran out of money. And he ran out of money because he had bought all that film.
Oh,
So
okay.
he had to go back to Mr. Ledwell and say, sorry, but you're going to lose all your money unless you put up, you got to
Oh,
put up
wow.
this other money, so additional money. So that's what happened. Yeah.
And I saw a figure of 160,000 was what they spent to film it.
So all told in, yep. So the post-production cost and about 160,000.
You
So
can't even make a low budget film for that now. I mean,
yeah,
that's nothing. That is nothing. I'm sure
it
at the
was.
time that was probably a significant expense, but
Well, especially to Mr. Ledwell, I mean, this
uh,
is a guy, a businessman from Texarkana, Texas. Okay, it's 1971 when my dad comes to him. The only people that made movies were like MGM, Louis B.
right.
Mayer. You know what I'm saying? Nobody, Texarkana people didn't do that kind of stuff. So I think that it was very courageous for Mr. Ledwell to even remotely consider that.
Oh yeah. So for those who don't know much about this movie, the story takes place in and around Fouke, Arkansas, Fouke, and let's put up that slide. So this is the very famous artwork, and tell us about this. I was fascinated to hear about the artist. I didn't know what you told me today. So
Sure. So this artwork was produced by Ralph McQuarrie. And in 1972, when my dad's finishing up the film in post production, he was introduced to Ralph, who was working at the time for Boeing and doing some work for NASA. So he comes up with it's actually an oil on canvas painting. My dad takes it back and then has it reproduced for the posters and everything. And it's this image and word of mouth, literally, that were driving the box office on this thing in the beginning. Everybody was just mesmerized and captivated by this image. Anyway, in 75, he's hired on the spot by George Lucas for Lucas's trio of scripts that he had sent to all the major studios in Los Angeles and been turned down for. He had decided that if he could get McQuarrie to do these storyboards to accompany the scripts, maybe it would make more sense, which of course it did. And Star Wars was greenlit by 20th Century Fox. So Ralph goes on to work as the production manager. He comes up with the look of the stormtroopers and the Death Star and Darth Vader and C-3PO, all of those, and our very favorite Chewbacca, which I tease that the Fouke Monster is Chewbacca's father.
there you go. I mean, you think Lucas had to be thinking about Bigfoot to some degree in creating Chewbacca. I mean, seriously, it's just too much of a similarity for that to not even have crossed his mind. I don't know what you think, Pam, but
Well, so in the things that I have read, there's a couple books that are out on McQuarrie and things. So, and what I've read is that Lucas hires McQuarrie on the spot with using posters that he had brought in for previous films he had done. And the only films he had done at that point in time were pretty much for my dad. He may have done a couple other ones, like maybe Return to Boggy Creek, though that wasn't my dad's, but it was it was the same group. It was Falk, the distributor, and so it was a little group right there. So that's what Lucas says. I hired him on the spot. He brought some movie posters in that he had done previously. So I'm guessing that Boggy Creek was in that group,
yeah, no doubt. And you said he came up with the Darth Vader
He did, yeah.
villain and
in these, writings where Boggy Creek has different types of fans, and one of the types of fans that it has, I call them my film buffs. They know film left and right, and so it's interesting to read some of their things about Boggy Creek, but they're the ones that first pointed these out. I didn't know any of this stuff before I started. But they say that there is a correlation between Darth Vader and the Phantom Killer. So, from my dad's town that dreaded sundown. And
Okay.
there are like, once you hear, it's the breathing apparatus, that it was Ralph McQuarrie that suggests to Lucas to use the breathing apparatus. And when my dad was making Dreaded Sundown, and he would go to tell the people what he would be describing, what the scene was going to be, or what he was whatever, he would kind of act it out, and he'd say, okay, and the Phantom has this hood over his face, and he's and he'd be breathing real hard in the mask. And I can't believe my dad didn't start hyperventilating, but he would act these things out. So I'm sure he acted it out for Ralph.
Sure.
He acted it out for everybody,
And then it
So
became
anyway, those are kind of fun.
the breath of Darth Vader, which everyone in the world knows now. So that's
So
fascinating.
we ended up doing about 5. I at one time the painting had gotten out of our family hands. My mother was awarded the painting in a divorce, and it was this whole thing, and it had stayed in this closet within a closet, and it was kind of hidden. And anyway, so at one point in time it goes missing, and my mother said something to me about it, but I didn't pay a lot of attention to her. And then after she passed away, so my mother ends up passing away 6 months to the day that my dad's buried. So they basically went together, and it came up about this painting and that it was gone, and I figured out who had it. Anyway, so I went after it. And here's the thing is, I had been a wife and a mom for honestly, 32 years, just being a wife and a mom. And all of a sudden I'm out there chasing this painting. It turned out that Lyle Blackburn had it. Thank goodness.
Oh, Lyle did. Oh, that's good.
Lyle ended up with it in this freak kind of way, but it had been taken by my brother, actually, and traded away years before, 1996 or something. And so Lyle was in Texarkana at a Comic-Con, and he had a copy of the poster in a frame. And this teenage girl walked by, and she tells her friend, yeah, my mom owns the original to that piece. And he was like, whoa, what did you say? And he jumped up and kind of ran after her. And so he said, take me to your mother, So he ended up buying it. And then when I called him, he sold it to me. And that was kind of the beginning. When I got the painting back, then it just, I don't know. I thought, well, I got to keep going now. I got to find that other print. So, like I said, it took a while, but it was so growing up in my family, we played a lot of Monopoly. And so Boggy Creek has been my own little personal, I'm landing on these spaces, and it's, so anyway.
Well, and to be honest, this original artwork for that movie is probably extremely valuable today.
It's considered a masterpiece. I've had it looked at, and so at one point I was told that it had to be good enough to hang next to Gilbert Stuart, George Washington. And I homeschooled for a long time, and so I've got some prints of Gilbert Stuart. I used to keep it in my classroom, but I was like, oh my, y'all have George. She was like, yes, ma'am, we do. Anyway, so I did show it to her, because I thought about selling it for a little while, just kind of getting an idea of what the status of everything was. But anyway, so we were talking. I said, oh, it's good enough to hang next to Gilbert Stuart. And she said, absolutely it is. She said, it is a masterpiece. So
How
that's
large is that
thrilling,
painting
huh?
actually? How large is that painting?
So it's the size of a poster.
Okay.
So they made it the size of a poster. Now, you know what? I'm going to tell you something real fun about this painting, too, that is a little bit different. So McQuarrie does the main piece, like you can see here. My dad takes it back to Texarkana. My dad had an ad agency at the time called Pierce Advertising. And so he had a man that worked for him named John Ball. And John Ball was kind of a hippie. He had long hair. He'd wear it in a ponytail, and he didn't like to wear shoes or whatever. And my dad was fine with that because they were just working in the office, and
Sure.
he was an incredible artist. So anyway, John ends up working for about 5 or 6 of my dad's films, all the way through, I think, probably a Victor's. And then he leaves, and I think he goes to Kansas City. Anyway, he gets this job, this corporate job. And here's this guy doesn't own a suit, literally likes to go barefoot to work. So they end up giving him this far, far away office, and it was a teeny, teeny, tiny little thing. So he names his division that they gave him Shoebox Greeting Cards, and it's Hallmark.
Oh, wow.
So John Ball was the creator
Wow.
of Shoebox Greeting Cards at Hallmark, and he does the entire bottom of the poster. Okay, so where it says The Legend of Boggy Creek, a true story, and then all that type, that was John Ball. So you've got Ralph McQuarrie, who is technically the highest grossing commercial illustrator of all time. Creating the Star Wars franchise, that's considered the most valuable franchise. So with McQuarrie creating that, he also was with Spielberg on E.T. and Close Encounters. So add that in, right? And literally, the job of a commercial illustrator is to sell product. Well, who sold more product, So you take that and then you add in the part with John Ball. John Ball, Shoebox Greeting Cards, has also done, billions. Literally, it's the highest grossing card company in the whole world, and it's Hallmark's most profitable division. So you put those two artists together, and no wonder that poster was.
No wonder. So
Yeah.
is that painting in your home now?
So I own the painting. I don't keep it at my home, but
Okay.
I own the painting. And so yeah, it's my it's my greatest
Oh, yeah.
possession. Yeah.
And there
When
you have the rest of the story of that painting. That's
they
amazing.
had so when I had taken it to show the painting, they said only one thing I would change, and that would be I would put a new frame on it.
Oh,
Because when they were doing that, they had no money. And if they spent some money, they really had no money, So when he was bringing the painting home, I'm guessing they just put the least expensive frame on
okay.
it. It was just really the cheapest one. So she said, I would reframe it if I were you. So I did. I went to I had it put into a frame that was suitable. And before, though, I said, I want you to leave that other frame on there. The original frame, just put it over it, like build the new frame over it. So now here's the thing. So when my brother had decided to trade whatever he was trading for the painting, I guess the people didn't want to get caught with it just out there or something. So they made him sign the back of it. They had him date the back of it, right? And so when I got it back into my possession, there it was. And it was almost like a check that had been endorsed,
Yeah.
So I had it put in the newspaper that we had, I had recovered it and whatever. So he calls me on the telephone. He said, "Hey, sis," he's been real nice to me, right? He said, "I'm just wondering," he said, "if you go to sell that painting, do I get a third of that?" I said, "Chuck, I'm still waiting on my third from the first time you sold."
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Well
So
said.
anyway, he yelled at me and said, "You can't do anything and without my signature." It was like, oh, funny you should say that, because I don't even think he probably remembered
Oh
it.
my gosh.
So yeah, so I kept it, and it's just the way that it's signed on the back is just
Just
part
like
of the
he was
story.
giving it over. Yep. That's amazing. Now
Anyway,
that previous slide, Steph, after the first painting, that just shows the difference in quality from the bootleg version to what they've done today. So
yeah, on the top you can kind of see where the compression, they would compress it, whatever, and then now in the bottom it's the wide angle. And I do think that wide angle Technoscope format makes you feel like you're a part of it. Like you feel like you're an observer and you're
sure.
watching everything that's going on here.
So I don't remember where, and there's no particular order to these, but now I put this in here because, and as I was going through your Facebook page, this is what I remember from the movie, and the scary kind of misty feel of that movie and the Bigfoot, because they never really showed the Bigfoot up close. I'm sure that was intentional because
Yeah.
probably wasn't a great costume at that time.
It
But
was an ape, a Hollywood ape costume that they had ordered from a costume house. And when it got there, the same guy, John Ball, the art director, took women's falls, like the long hair falls, and he sewed them on different places. So that's what you're seeing here.
Don't
This is
don't let the ape community in the Bigfoot world
actually-
know that was an ape costume. God forbid.
yeah. Well,
So they added extensions basically onto that suit.
they sewed the falls on, and then when it was time to send the costume back, they needed their money back. Okay, so they removed all those
Oh
falls
wow.
and then sent
Okay.
it back. What was kind of interesting too is, so if you remember in the film, the 3 teenage girls, they asked for a Coke. Remember, I'm gonna have a Coke. Do y'all want one? Well, near the end too. So Mr. Ledwell he was so good about saving money and everything, right? And my dad was notorious for it. My dad could make low budget, low budget, low budget. But anyway, so they're trying to get all this stuff together. And it's the Ford scene at the end where they're moving into the little house, right? So they needed a trailer. And Mr. Ledwell goes over because he had the money and the credit cards, right? And they're like, go rent a trailer. We need this trailer. So he goes over there to the rental place. The woman was telling me this too herself not too long ago. So she said that he came in and he said, you need to just give me this rental for the day. And he said, I will make sure that we get a good shot of that Agan Reynolds on the side, and you're going to become famous before this whole thing is over. So he actually did convince her to not charge him that rental. And if you watch in that scene, when it comes up, you'll see a little Agan Reynolds right there.
Sure enough. Nope,
So
I've never noticed that, but I'll look for it now.
Huh?
I said I've never noticed that, but I'll sure look for it next time.
So that was kind of a new. There's so many like little things about Boggy Creek. It has almost a life of its own.
So you said there were 3 actors who played the monster. Tell us about that.
So this, I believe, is Keith Crabtree in this scene. And this was one of the first scenes that they filmed. I do believe he shot him with something. I think there were little pellets that went everywhere. But as you can imagine, the costume was super hot. It's Falk Arkansas. y'all.
Arkansas,
Okay?
yeah.
Very hot, very sticky, all of that stuff. And of course, most people thought that Boggy Creek was going to be the failure of all failure. No one believed that it was going to be any kind of success. So at a certain point in time, right after this scene, this actor quits. Okay. He kind of threw a little bit of a temper tantrum and said he walked off. Okay. Well, then the job fell to the man who was putting up all the money, Mr. Ledwell, had a son, one son, Steve, who later gives me the film, and Steve is then recruited to become the creature. So yeah, and then when Steve couldn't do it, when they were starting to wrap it up, and he was starting to say, "Okay, I'm not going to do it anymore," then they got my uncle, who was my mom's little brother, and he was the smallest one out of them. But now I'm in the movie. I'm in the scene with my real mother, and I play Bessie Smith's daughter.
Let's
Bessie
see, and
Smith
I believe I've got that picture in here, Pam, of you and
and the
we'll
mom.
we'll come back to this. So good,
Okay.
keep going.
So
Okay, so
yep, there we
go
are.
back
Right
to the red one first. This is your mom, right?
Yep. So that's my real mother. And so in this scene, of course, so my uncle Steve comes to pick me up from school that day. And he said he was in a real bad mood. And he said, "Your dad needs you on whatever." So I didn't even really talk to him. So he was just really foul. So now in hindsight, I almost think that he played the creature in my scene, but to this day I don't know who. I got to ask Steve Lidwell if it were him or anyway. So I asked my dad. I said, "Are we going to see the monster?" Because that's what you want to know because I was 10 years old as well. So my dad was really staying a long way away from me. And I'm sure it was because he didn't want me to ask, "Are we going to see?" Because he didn't want me to know, so that when I did see him step out, that it would be a genuine surprise, and I would really be scared, which I was. And so yeah, but I don't know if that was my uncle or if that was Steve Ledwell in that scene.
So the next one is you and your mom and some other kids here.
Yeah. So, and so all of these people were either the actual people that it happened to, or someone close to them, like Travis Crabtree. His brother had an encounter, but Lynn Crabtree didn't want to be in the movie, so Travis was in. And the other thing too is when my dad when he would shoot the scenes, a lot of times they were shot where it actually happened, the encounters occurred. And also the people that they had occurred to were there as almost like a reference to make sure that it was right. Like the scenes. So these were just actresses from the high school. But at the beginning, like Mary Beth, Cersei, where they said there's a draft on the baby.
Yep.
So that was the real Mary Beth that was in the bed with the baby.
Okay.
So that's her real mother, and that's the real house. The one that you were just on to, that was Willie Smith. That's that's Willie Smith, and that guy had the real encounter.
Now tell us about the encounter that got this whole thing going.
Well, so the encounters have been going on for a while. I mean, maybe even close to 100 years or something. I mean, they had been happening for a while, but then there was a rash that kind of happened all at once. And that was in like 71. I was in the second grade. I'll never forget this. It was raining, and I had to, when it was raining, we would go into the cafeteria for lunch. And so it was actually before school, and I'd gotten there, and all these kids were in the cafeteria, and they're all talking about this monster, and that somebody was attacked by this monster. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "Oh yeah, you didn't see this. It was in the newspaper." I was like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." Well, it was a monster. And so I'm thinking to myself, but there are no such thing as monsters, because that's what my parents told me all the time.
Of
There are
course, yeah.
no monsters. So a couple days later, I heard my father telling my mom that he was going to make this movie about this monster. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's talking about that monster they were talking about at school, you know? So I kind of stood there and listened to him. And my mother surprisingly went along with it. She didn't say, like, that's the craziest story.
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about? You don't need to be doing something so silly as that. She just was kind of mesmerized by the whole thing. And and so the next thing I know, that's what they were doing. I remember looking down the stairs, and my father was sitting on the floor, and he had his camera all around him, and he had the instructions, and he was putting it all together. So,
And put that slide back up. This is Willie, and you said Willie used to laugh at people about their
he did,
stories.
yeah, until he had an encounter himself. And then that's kind of how the movie starts out. He says he's not laughing anymore. And I think that that's how a lot of people felt. It's like, okay, so now you know.
Right. Yeah, and I told you that I've had that happen with people here who would mock me, other people, and then lo and behold,
Yeah.
at midnight one night, here's the Sasquatch crosses the road in front of them, and boy, did they change their tune. I'll tell you what.
That's so my dad would talk about, the people that he had come to know or whatever that
Mhm.
had encounters. And I think that was the number one thing that made him believe is he said, these people are not making this up.
Right.
Now, what they saw, I'm not exactly sure what they saw, but they positively saw something.
Right.
And he just said, these are God-fearing people. They're like, he believed him.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and Falk has now become synonymous with Sasquatch and with the Fouke Monster, kind of like Honobia, Oklahoma, where the whole town kind of embraced this theme, if you will. I've been trying to get people in Bailey to do the same thing for 10 years, and I haven't succeeded yet. But yeah, Falk is known nationwide for being where the movie was made and being a hot spot for Bigfoot sightings. And so
I do think that the Bobby Ford attack, when that happened, probably fueled it a great deal, because even to this day, you don't usually have encounters where, the guy went to the hospital. He was in shock. He had scratches and cuts on his body. I mean, he had been wrestling with something out there in the,
so he was physically
he
attacked
was
by a Sasquatch.
he was physically jumped by the Sasquatch, and he
Wow.
went into shock. I mean, they took him to the hospital. They couldn't get him to come out of, he was like in shock.
Yeah.
So, and then they moved away. They never ever went back to that house again. So they literally just moved away.
And people do that. I've known people that have moved away from here after they had an encounter. So now I don't remember what we had here. I don't remember what this was. I was gonna have you explain it.
So I am invited to these really fun, like, festivals and that kind of stuff. This was in Pittsburgh, Monster Bash, which they've been doing it for a really long time. And they have, all kinds of movie monsters in there. And this is they did a question and answer. And then, so I did have these cutouts made for, I've been doing market research. I've been working on a project for 3 years. When my dad first finished Boggy Creek, he called Los Angeles to get a distributor, and they literally hung up on him. Like, he couldn't get, so he comes back and he decides to what they call four wall. Have you ever heard of four walling? It means that, so you go and you rent the theater, the four walls and everything that goes,
Okay.
you know, in there. So tickets and the ticket taker and the just everything, you pay all expenses. And then the four waller takes the box office at the end of the night in its
Okay.
entirety. But it's a real tricky thing because those expenses can add up pretty fast.
Yeah.
I went back to the Perot to premiere again, like my dad, and I four-walled it just for the, you know, for the experience of the four-wall. And those expenses do add up very quickly. But at the end, I did take the whole box office, you know?
Yeah.
So that's what he was doing. And because of that, the theater owners couldn't see what the film was bringing in. Okay, like that was kind of a mystery to them. But they were doing like record-breaking concession stand sales. And we came up with several reasons why we think that that was probably happening. But Mr. Ledwell told me that the Legend of Boggy Creek held concession stand records for decades, that it went for so long and held those
Wow.
records. But that is what got the attention of the first theater owner, Mr. Joy Houck. And Joy owned these Joy Cinema Cities and Joy's Drive-Ins and the Joy down on Canal Street in New Orleans. And so he was kind of this legendary theater owner. And my dad, it was like just a normal weekday or something. And my dad had always played tight with money. Okay. My dad never had any. And so when he started making money, my mother was like, you need to go buy this house for us, because they were renting this house. And he was doing all kinds of other stuff, buying other stuff. She was like, I want a house. You go get this house. So he made an appointment to go to the bank, whatever. And all of a sudden there's this knock at the door, and he goes, and it's Mr. Houck. And he says, you know, I'm sorry to come and just drop in, but he said, I would really like to talk to you. And my dad was like, there is nobody else on the face of this earth that I would like to talk to more than you, because here's this distributor, you know?
Yeah.
And he said, but I've got this meeting and my wife is going to kill me if I do not go. And he's like, I'm supposed to be at the bank. You know, Mr. Mr. Houck was kind of feeling around. He said, yeah, I got to go to the bank. My wife is pressuring me about this mortgage or whatever. So he says, well, let me ask you. He said, how much are you looking for? And, you know, the house was not really expensive. This was a long time ago, too. So it was like $27,000 or something like that.
I can't even imagine today.
I know. So, so he tells Mr. Houck how much, you know, he's looking for. And so he says, well, I tell you what if I write you a check for whatever this amount is? And he said, and no matter what happens with you or I, whether we do a deal or not, if you will sit here and talk to me now, cancel your appointment, sit here and talk, you can have that money.
Oh, wow.
So my dad was like, you know what? That's a deal. I could do.
That's a deal.
So I always would tell you, well, that's how my mother got her house and my dad got his distributor. So I kept waiting and I kept saying, no, my Mr. Houck is going to show up. It's going to show up, because I didn't want to just go. I mean, we're dealing with Hollywood, that's swimming with the shark kind of
Oh, yeah.
material.
Yeah.
So I just kept praying and praying and praying. Anyway, I did find my Mr. Houck. I can't say who it is yet, but very, very, very
Wow.
soon we will. And I think that fans of Boggy Creek will just be so delighted because it's just such a wonderful group. These people know what they're doing. They're very familiar with this whole thing. It's really like miraculous almost kind of stuff.
So the movie got y'all a house. That's a great story.
Well, so yeah, it got my parents a house.
Your parents a house, yeah.
Yeah, it got my parents a house.
So yeah, I mean, there's so many rest of the story kinds of stories around this movie. It's just amazing that I'd never heard before. Let's see. Bobby Ford told officials the creature poked its paw through a hole in the window
Right.
before he and 3 others chased it. And yeah, so that really did happen.
Right. So when later on, like I said, I was talking to Travis Crabtree and I said, so like, how did this all happen? And that's when he said, my dad, Lynn, was in the newspaper and my dad was as a guide and whatever. So he said that, I'm sorry, I have kids coming in here. So he said that he was always like, he had never had an encounter or whatever, but that Lynn, it changed everything in his life after he did.
Wow.
And then because I guess it had been in the newspaper, well, they teased him about it a lot. They also teased Travis a lot after the movie came out and the whole Hey Travis Crabtree. But he told me that he'll never forget when they went down and his dad had taken him to the different people who had encounters. Now, not everybody wanted their story used, not just Lynn, but others too.
Because in those days, people didn't talk about it a lot.
Did not talk about it really at all. So for them to tell my dad was a huge leap of faith. But Travis said that he'll never forget Earl just riding as fast as he could. And if they told him, like, put a blanket over the window, the baby's going to catch a cold. That's what they said, So as the people were recounting what had happened, Earl was literally just writing down what they told him. So if Bobby was sitting on the sofa and the paw or the whatever arm came through, that's what they told him. Or that's what was in the accounts of the newspaper, because sometimes he took newspaper accounts as well. I don't think
they really respected the actual stories when they made the film. I mean, they honored those stories to a T.
Oh yeah, that would have been the last thing. My dad would not have changed their stories.
Really? That's really cool.
No, he was my dad really respected those people a great deal. So no, he wouldn't have.
Now there's a couple more slides here I want to go through. I asked you about this one, this dark old wooden house. What's the story behind this?
So I'm not sure. I think that may be the barn. And right before my scene, it says, there's Bessie Smith's kids playing on the edge of the field.
Okay.
And it shows this barn, I think. And you can hear us playing, like just the sound of kids playing. And then it starts to get closer. And then that's when I run into the house and say, Grandpa, we saw him. We saw the Fouke Monster. So that's how that scene starts out. But when it was in bootleg, it was pretty much black. You couldn't see anything at all.
This is very dark. Yeah. This, Okay. Let's see. What else did we have?
Another thing too is in the bootleg, you didn't see the monster very much,
Yeah.
and the monster is definitely back in the film.
Yeah. So this is what Falk Falk has become,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
Monster Mart, and
Monster.
you said you think this is where um
The
the
Willie
Willie
Smith's.
Smith's store used to be.
I think that's where it
Okay.
used to sit. Yeah.
I don't
You
know who
notice
built that Bigfoot for him. That's pretty good Bigfoot.
pretty good, yeah. You know, the thing is if you look at the beginning of the, in Boggy Creek where it's like, this is Falk or whatever,
Mhm.
it's not changed. It really has not changed that much. The Monster Mart's the biggest change, probably.
You got to have a Monster Mart, I guess. We don't have one in Bailey. The Sasquatch Outpost is what we've got, but I always loved the fact that they built this thing called it Monster Mart.
And
So
that they have, I mean, people come from all over the world. They have their guest book there, and it'll like just, I can't even believe people stop. And I've shipped to like 38 countries, I think.
I believe it.
It really is shocking to me that people know this movie all over like that.
Like I said in the beginning, this movie got me started, when I was 10 years old. And so that's the first time I'd ever even heard about anything like a Bigfoot. When I was 10.
Well, it was kind of
So
probably like me a little bit. It's like, oh, a monster attacks me. It's like, a monster did what?
Yeah.
It's like, what are you talking about? Because it
Yeah.
was so hard to wrap your head around, and I had
True.
never
True.
heard of a Bigfoot when I was in the 2nd grade. I didn't know what that was. It was like, yeah, that was.
I mean, that term was around at that time, but it wasn't like it was being used all the time. So, Bigfoot, and people think that Bigfoot is the name. Bigfoot was coined by a newspaper reporter because they found these footprints in California and they were big. So, and like so many things about Sasquatch, of course, there's stories now that, well, those footprints were faked, and it's just, where there's a story, there's going to be somebody who wants to make it a hoax or make it not true. So,
which is really sad
it
because
is. Yeah,
it does take away from the people who have had genuine
absolutely.
encounters, and I do. We were talking about that a little bit before, because I mean, even I meet hoaxers because
Sure.
they're all the time trying to convince me of something. It's like,
Sure.
oh, whatever,
Yeah, whatever. Get the eyes rolling, and it's like,
my dad used to like, because I'd be with my dad and he'd be like, I mean, he was really good. He loved, talking with his fans and he loved talking about the creature and all that stuff. But sometimes I would see him like making a beeline, be like, oh my God, where's that guy again?
gotta get rid of that guy. Yeah, and people talk about it more now than they used to.
They sure do, yeah.
But it's still, for some people, it's still kind of a problem to talk about something that happened to them because they're afraid they'll be made fun of. But that's not the case. Even now, from when we opened our store, that has changed dramatically in 12 years. So a lot more acceptance now because of your movie, your dad's movie, and because of all the documentaries and other movies that have come out about Sasquatch, some of which are horrible, terrible movies that depict them just as bloodthirsty, slaughtering people in the woods and stuff. But that's what I loved about Boggy Creek is it was scary as a child, but it wasn't scary because it was killing people and bloody and everything. It was scary
Right.
because it was a big monster.
And because it's leaving your own imagination to work out what is that noise I just heard.
Exactly.
Yeah. honestly, those can be the scariest of all because your mind can play so
Yeah.
many tricks. And I think that my dad somehow instinctively knew that up
Hmm.
front. I'm a little bit surprised with him sometimes because even though the film, I think that they did a good job in the way that it ends, that it wraps up with Jim, and he
Mhm.
comes back and, like I said, he says some people may not believe this, and that's your prerogative,
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good way to look at it because, like you were saying, some people are just going to be skeptics.
Yep.
But hey, if you're ever over here in this neck of the woods, keep an eye out at the tree line and see if you see
Yeah.
anything, you know?
Amen. Amen. Well, this has been so much fun, and I have learned so much about this movie that I never knew. Even in talking to you, the past couple of years, I've learned a lot tonight that you and I have never talked about. So, um, I really appreciate you coming on. And for those who've never watched the Legend of Boggy Creek, watch it now. You can buy the 4K DVD, and I don't know. Did you ever send me any to sell? I can't remember if you did. I know
So
we've sold the
either
posters, but
DVD or Blu-ray, but I don't think you
Blu-ray.
have them. Yeah.
Well, let's
So I
talk
just
some
made
more.
those. We just finished having, and we had them produced this time by Technicolor.
Okay.
So the color, I have to tell you, when you were saying the thing about the paranormal, I got to close out with this little thing. So I was saying when I was watching where you watch the film to give the okay to say, okay, print it or
Mhm.
whatever. So I was watching that final one and I was going through and the 4K was up there and I had it on a good screen, the 4K, and I felt like I could just reach out there and touch it and the colors were, and I just
Mhm.
started crying kind of, and I
Oh,
looked at
wow.
my husband and I was like, oh my gosh, I just hope some way that there's just some way that my dad could see
Mm.
this and that he knows somehow. And so anyway, I finished up. And then a couple days later, I get this message from this. I've been friends with this woman on Facebook for about 10 years, but we've never conversed privately or anything. And she said, I am so sorry to bother you. She said, please, please don't think I'm crazy. And she said, but I get these messages
Hmm.
and I have to share them. And if I don't share them, they won't go away. And I've got one for you. And
Oh,
it's like,
wow.
unless I tell you, it's gonna keep coming up. And she said, I don't know who it is. I think it may be your dad. And she said, but I'm supposed to tell you that he really likes the color.
Oh, wow. What a great thing
And so she
to
said, I
hear.
don't know if that's your garden or what. I said, no, that's the
No,
4K. No,
it's a movie.
that's the movie. So
Oh, that is so cool that he's pleased. I mean, she could have told you anything, but to say that he
that
loves the color.
that he loves the color because that would be exactly what he would, that or fishing. That's how it felt like
Yeah.
that I knew that it was from my dad. So
Well, let's talk some more. I'd love to get some more copies to sell in the
okay,
store,
all
and
righty. I'll get you some.
and it's, as always, it's been a delight to chat with you, Pam. I really
Thank you
appreciate you
so much
giving us some time tonight.
for having me on and
Absolutely.
appreciate it very much. This is fun.
Yes, it is, and we'll
I'm
keep
gonna come
on
see
doing
you
this.
over there in
I
Bailey.
hope you will. I hope
Yeah,
you
I
will.
will.
I'll
Yeah.
make a big deal about it if you do.
Okay,
So
I will for sure. We'll talk about it more soon as
you
I get
bet. You bet. No, I'm serious. Well, I'd love to have you come speak and get people to come hear you. So
okay.
I think that'd be a lot of fun.
All right. Well, thank you so
Okay.
much again.
You are welcome. Thank you. And for all of our regular watchers and subscribers, until next Tuesday night, keep on squatching.